announcements, none. Papers have been laid. Questions?
Yes, Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have given notice, the following private notice question, which is addressed to Dr. the Honourable Prime Minister, Minister of Defence, Home Affairs and External Communications, Minister of Finance, Minister for Rodrigues and Outer Islands, whether in regard to the decision taken by the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Mauritius on 20th May 2026 to raise the key rate by 25 basis points from 4.5% to 4.75% per annum, he will state the anticipated effects thereof on households and on the different sectors of the economy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, let me at the very outset stress that the Bank of Mauritius is now totally independent to carry out its roles and functions as stipulated by the Bank of Mauritius Act. Unlike the previous government, there is now absolutely no interference from the Ministry of Finance or the government bodies in the policies and operations of the Bank of Mauritius. Madam Speaker, we all know the extent of the interferences and the directives given by the previous Minister of Finance to the central bank. The consequences of such interferences have been very, very damaging and were a direct threat to the very stability of the banking system and the financial system as a whole. We are still having to deal with these consequences. Madam Speaker, since coming into office, we have re-established the total independence of the Central Bank and the Monetary Policy Committee. We have given the Bank of Mauritius the space to carry out its primary objective, which is to maintain price stability and promote orderly and balanced economic development. Madam Speaker, the Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, met on the 20th of May of this year and unanimously voted to raise the key rate by 35 basic points, that is from 4.50% to 4.75% per annum. Recent increases in energy prices have raised inflation worldwide and introduced fresh upside risk to inflation trajectories. Under the baseline scenario worked out by the Bank of Mauritius that assumes an average price of oil price of US dollars 90 per barrel, 90 US dollars, it is not 90 US dollars at the moment, the resolution of the conflict and a complete reopening of the Strait of Hormuz by the end, hopefully, of June of this year, headline inflation is projected to rise around 5.5% in calendar year 2026. This, Madam Speaker, is well above the previous forecast of 3.6% and above the upper end of inflation target range of 2.5%. Core inflation, which excludes volatile items such as the prices of fuel and food products, stood at 6.1% for the month of April 2026, that is on a year-to-year basis. This measure indicates underlying inflationary pressures arising mainly domestically. Madam Speaker, let me explain the main source of this inflationary pressure. The bank transferred a total amount of 97 billion rupees to the government during the period 2019 to 2024. In addition to the 3.5 billion remitted to the National Property Fund prior to 2019, these transfers, coupled with the amount of 81 billion rupees that the bank printed to finance the Mauritius Investment Corporation, created a situation of massive liquidity. This, in turn, contributed to the high levels of inflation that the country experienced and to the significant depreciation of the rupee. At the time, inflation had risen above 11%. Excess liquidity was at an all-time high, around 90 billion rupees in August 2023. The inflation rate reached a peak, as I said, of 11.3% in February 2023, while the rupee depreciated, since 2014 to 2024, it depreciated by 46% against the US dollars. Between 2019, to the end of December 2024, it depreciated, because we're talking about this period, by 30% against the US dollars. Furthermore, an overly accommodative monetary policy stance of the Bank of Mauritius during this period led to wide interest rate differentials between instruments denominated in rupees and those denominated in US dollars. This contributed to the significant weakening of the rupee and fueling inflationary pressures. Madam Speaker, in making the decision to raise the key rate by 25 basic points, I'm informed that the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank took into consideration the macroeconomic implications that the recent escalation of geopolitical tensions and the US-Iran conflict have, for small and highly open economies such as Mauritius, has macroeconomic implications, wide macroeconomic implications. The MPC weighted the risk to inflation of higher international fuel prices, increased freight, increased transportation costs, and exchange rate pressures against the risk posed to the domestic economic outlook. While headline inflation remained unchanged at 4.2% between March and April 2026, year-on-year inflation showed a notable increase to 3.6% in April from 2.7% in March, primarily again driven by rising energy prices and some second-round effects. Core inflation, which indicates the underlying price pressures in the economy, remain elevated. On a year-on-year basis, core inflation rose to 6.1%. Domestic generated inflation, particularly services inflation, continued to contribute substantially to price pressures, although imported inflation, driven by higher energy prices and elevated freight and logistic costs, has strengthened. I'm informed by the Bank of Mauritius that in the inflation expectation survey conducted in March 2026, the near-term inflation expectations have drifted upwards, that is, in line with the expectations of higher fuel and other supply costs. The outlook for inflation is influenced by fuel prices pass-through, persistent core inflation, and geopolitical development, with risk firmly tilted to the upside. It is necessary to act in a timely and measured manner to preserve price stability, mitigate the risk of a second-round inflationary effects becoming embedded in the economy, and safeguard macroeconomic stability over the medium term. Madam Speaker, in regards to the impact of the increase in key rate on households, it will depend on whether the household, of course, is a net debtor or a creditor, a net saver. I'm informed that at the end of March 2026, household held rupee loans amounting to 202.2 billion rupees. The weighted average interest rate that they paid on the outstanding loans was 6.8%. Therefore, if we assume for a moment that a household has a loan of, say, 500,000 rupees, an increase of 25 basis points in the key rate is fully reflected by the banks on the interest rates that they charge. This will entail an increase of 1,250 rupees per annum in the amount of interest rate repayments. The same increase would be applicable to corporates who have loans. Madam Speaker, on the other hand, households held transferable deposits for an amount of 457.1 billion rupees as at the end of March 2026. Interest rate on rupee deposits was between 2.95% to 3.4%. Assuming that banks will fully reflect the increase in the key rate, the interest rates that households will earn on the saving deposits will also increase by 25 basic points. Madam Speaker, as regard to the impact on the economy, the increase in the key rate will help dampen inflationary pressures, support the Mauritian rupee, prevent runaway inflation. We must not underestimate the damage that inflation can do to an economy. We know the experience of many countries, such as Argentina in the past, Zimbabwe and other countries, that have experienced inflation exceeding 1,000% per month.
Yes, your first supplementary. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Monsieur le Premier ministre, il est inutile d'aller chercher des excuses qui remontent à 2019.
Posez
Ce
votre question.
coup de massue-là, on reçoit ça maintenant, Madame la Présidente. Since the Honourable Prime Minister, in his reply, he stated that the Bank of Mauritius has a mandate to contain inflation and maintain price stability. Will the Honourable Prime Minister inform the House why, up to now, there are no measures to support the population that is suffering from an unprecedented increase in the cost of living?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition surely knows what happened before. You're saying we're talking about the past. But it is the past that we are now reaping the consequences. You printed money. You gave money left, right, and center to win elections which you did not win. That is the consequence of what is happening.
Next question. No comments, please.
Now, Madam Speaker, since the economy is shrinking with a lower growth, that is from 4.9 in 2024 to 3.5 in 2025 and forecasted to decrease by 2.8 this year, does the Honourable Prime Minister realize that an increase in the cost of credit amid slowing economic activity would further contract the economy of this country?
Well, what would the Leader of the Opposition want us to allow inflation to go up and prices to increase? That is the question you should be asking yourself.
No, my question
This is what we
is very relevant, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Prime Minister should be relevant in his reply, Madam Speaker. Has government taken into consideration that an increase in the cost of money, that is higher interest rates, will further affect households, businesses, and the government in terms of debt burden?
Honourable Leader of the Speaker, I don't know, the Leader of the Opposition, I don't know what to say to his answer. It is a simplistic answer, trying to catch headlines. If interest rates had not gone up, do you realize that the rupee would have depreciated further? Cost of items would have increased. Do you know this is basic economics? Do you realize this is what will have happened?
I can't hear the Prime Minister if you speak.
Madam Speaker, let me come to another sector, very important sector. SMEs are facing compounded pressures due to decisions taken by this government. Higher borrowing costs from the repo rate increase now, reduced cash flow from the lowered VAT threshold, elevated input costs from currency depreciation and freight disruptions, and also weakening consumer demand. Unfortunately, Honourable Prime Minister, up to now, there is no real support that has been extended to SMEs, and this is an urgent concern. Can the Honourable Prime Minister inform the House what rapid and urgent measures will government take to prevent massive job losses in the SME sector?
Speaker, he's confusing a lot of things at the same time. We have done things for the SMEs. Don't think we haven't done anything. But wait for the budget. Maybe we'll do more. I can't tell you about budgetary. We have.
The budget.
Yeah, you don't seem to know, but we have. Now, again, Madam Speaker, we have to do a balance between inflation and growth. Inflation is the worst enemy. It's a tax on people, on everybody. This is what we have to control first of all. This is the objective of the central bank. Inflation must be controlled.
Which has not been achieved.
Question, please.
11.3% at your time.
Madam Speaker, the Bank of Mauritius December 2025 Financial Stability Report indicate that household debt has reached 281 billion rupees, with debt servicing consuming 17.9 of household income, and now we have a repo rate which has been increased to 4.75, and you stated that in your reply, a core inflation at 6.1. And also, we should add to that an increase in electricity tariff of 15%. Will the Honourable Prime Minister agree that the financial resilience of many households in this country have reached its limits? Would he inform the House what quantitative threshold would trigger emergency measures to prevent household distress from escalating into systemic risk?
First of all, I said in my reply at the beginning that interest rates are not determined by government, but it is determined by the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank. That is why we have made them independent, so that politicians do not interfere and make matters worse, as you did at your time. Now, you mentioned, I think you mentioned high core inflation. Let me tell you, it is different from headline inflation. High core inflation was already very high because of what you did, printing money, excess liquidity in the system. This resulted, as we know, in the depreciation of the rupee. The rupee depreciated by 46%, Madam Speaker, from 2014 to 2020 against the dollar. You have given increases, money was spread around. This is the consequence to get excess liquidity in the system. This is what we have to correct, and we will correct.
Decisions to support the population is taken by government, Madam Speaker. Is the Honourable Prime Minister aware, Madam Speaker, that households are suffering, like we say in our language, with the high increase in fuel, electricity and food essentials, and now an increase in repo rate to 4.75%?
Madam Speaker, the leader of the opposition probably is on purpose not remembering what they did with the excess liquidity, the printed money, not 1 cent, billions of rupees. They've given money away. This is what caused the excess liquidity in the system. You have to fight it. You can't fight inflation with mirrors. You have to fight inflation by acts.
Next question. Don't give me that smile. And
Madam Speaker, under the previous government, borrowers received temporary financial support to offset additional loan burden following repo rate increases. Will government consider a similar compassionate measure, Madam Speaker?
You managed to do that because you were printing money. That is what they did.
Money legislation rayé ça, Madam Speaker. With property prices outstripping income growth prior to this repo rate increase. And also, Madam Speaker, with mortgage rates rising alongside construction costs. You will agree, Madam Speaker, that home ownership is becoming increasingly unaffordable for low-income earners, young professionals, and especially the middle class. Can the Honourable Prime Minister inform the House whether there has been an impact analysis of mortgage defaults on bank stability, and what measures will government take to mitigate the impact?
The repo rate has just been increased, Madam Speaker. We will certainly look at all these, but the fact remains that we had the first core duty of the Bank of Mauritius has to be to fight inflation.
next question.
Is again irrelevant, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, despite foreign exchange market interventions and 2 repo rate interventions in February 2025, the rupee now trades above 47 rupees per USD, which is a historic high, while foreign currency deposits have surged to 1.9 billion USD. Will the Honourable Prime Minister confirm that this trend signals eroding public confidence in the Mauritian rupee.
Madam Speaker, I should remind the leader of the opposition again. He's misleading the country.
Exactly.
You don't seem to realize that there is a time lag. When you take an action, economic action, there is a time lag. We are now suffering from what you did for 10 years. He's talking about the depreciation, 46% against the dollar from 2014 to 2024. How does he explain that?
Madam Speaker, the Mauritian economy advanced by only 2.7% year-on-year in the fourth quarter of 2025, the weakest since 2021, with the Bank of Mauritius projecting further moderation to 2.8 in 2026 amid persistent inflationary pressures. Does the Honourable Prime Minister accept that the economy risks entering a technical recession if current trends persist, Madam Speaker?
This is what the leader of the opposition wishes. This is why we are fighting. We are fighting. This is what you're wishing. We know how the MSM operates. They want to, if this country could get worse, so much better for them. They think they will come back. They will not.
Your friend has asked for a supplementary. Will you allow him?
Thank you very much, Speaker. May I ask the Prime Minister, is the Prime Minister conscious that the Bank of Mauritius is attempting to control inflation, whilst the IMF is saying itself that inflation is being driven by international fuel and food prices, and therefore that such monetary fiscal measures, the imposition of the higher key rate, is not going to do anything to reducing fuel and food prices unless government comes with targeted measures urgently to reduce VAT, firstly, to cap it, like it has been said, and secondly, to allow parallel importation. That is where government should be acting instead.
That is something else, but obviously I hope the honourable member of the opposition knows that there is a war actually which is pushing all these prices up.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So you don't want us to do anything?
Yes.
In the same vein, Madam Speaker, given the unprecedented cost of living facing Mauritian households, will the Honourable Prime Minister reconsider the phased withdrawal of CSG-linked allowances and instead reinstate or recalibrate these supports, particularly for those households not on the social register of Mauritius?
If I could laugh, I would laugh because they introduced, yes, you introduced it. Now you want us to take it out immediately. But why did you introduce it in the first place?
Mr. Speaker, I think the Honourable Prime Minister has not understood my question. I'm asking to reinstate the CSG allowance.
And allow things to go back to what it was before? No. The answer is no.
Last question, Madam Speaker. Mauritians are going frustrated, believing that this government is out of touch and does not grasp how serious the cost of living crisis is in this country. Does the Honourable Prime Minister believe that public perception is misplaced, or does he acknowledge that more decisive, empathetic and targeted action is required to help the population to make both ends meet?
I'm not saying it is not. It is. We all know it is. We are suffering the consequences of 10 years of MSM plus now the war, which is now putting us in a difficulty. You cannot defy economic gravity with impunity, Madam Speaker.
Another question from your friend, yes.
May I ask the government, well, ask the Prime Minister, how much is inflation estimated to fall now with this increase in repo rate, if we can have the estimate to see if that is going to have any impact at all on the economy?
What is more important, Madam Speaker, is not the inflation rate, the expectation of inflation rate. That is what drives an economy, what people expect the inflation rate to be. We have to wait and see.
Okay, good. That is it. Thank you very much. PMQT now. Yes, Honourable Etwaria.
Merci Madame la Présidente.
P782, s'il vous plaît. Merci.
Madam Speaker, at the time we left office in December 2014, the public sector debt to GDP ratio, I'm talking about December when we left office, the public sector debt to GDP stood at 58.8%. That is below the 60% that is in force in many European countries. However, the previous government irresponsible fiscal stewardship resulted in a sharp increase in the debt ratio, reaching 87.7% by December 2024. In absolute terms, the public sector debt increased from 238 billion rupees in December 2014 to 608.2 billion rupees in December 2024. That is an increase of 370 million rupees. To conceal their deliberate, I must say, irresponsible and reprehensible act, they suspended the statutory debt ceiling and set a new higher limit of 80% of GDP instead of the 60% that it was. Yet the debt ratio, Madam Speaker, went beyond the roof, well above the 80% limit, which they said themselves. It went beyond that, but they kept quiet. They didn't do anything about this, as if Alice in Wonderland. Due to the precarious fiscal situation that we inherited with a high stock of debt coupled with a huge deficit, we had to embark on a fiscal consolidation program. In the 2025-2026 budget estimates, it was projected that the public sector debt would amount to 679.7 billion rupees as at the end of June 2026, which would represent about 88.3% of GDP. Public sector debt is estimated at 675.4 billion rupees as at the end of March 2026, compared to 661.1 billion at the end of December 2025. This represents, Madam Speaker, an increase of 14.3 billion rupees over this period. That is up to the end of 2025, up to March 2026. The increase in the debt level is explained mainly by, one, higher central government debt of 11.1 billion rupees, resulting from the expenditure of 56 billion rupees, exceeding the revenue of 46 billion rupees during the quarterly period January to March 2026. The main contributors being the payment of salary compensation and basic pensions. And second, higher debt of public enterprises of some 3.2 billion rupees, mainly due to higher overdraft facilities of 1.5 billion rupees and 1.1 billion rupees mobilized by the CEB and the STC to cope with the rising working capital and foreign exchange requirements driven by the rise in international oil prices due to the conflict, as I said, in the Middle East. Madam Speaker, the level of public debt is expected to exceed the estimated figure for the financial year 2025-2026 due to the following reasons. One, first, there would be a shortfall in revenue of around 10 billion rupees due to the delay in the ratification of the Chagos Treaty. Second, with the conflict in the Middle East, real GDP growth is now expected to be lower than projected. This will obviously have a negative impact on government revenues. Third, government revenues will be lower in view of the expected slower growth in consumption, which is in line with the government's strategy to move away from a consumption-driven economy to a high import content to an investment-led growth model. In addition, the relatively weak dollar during the first semester of the fiscal year has negatively affected VAT receipts. And fourth, adjustments in the implementation of some budget measures in order to protect the most vulnerable and support growth and investment. Madam Speaker, as I previously stated in a reply to a parliamentary question, the Minister of Finance has implemented a series of measures to contain expenditure in order to mitigate the impact of lower revenue on public finances. With regard to the creditors, additional borrowing requirements will be met primarily through issuance of government securities. Madam Speaker, government is firmly committed to reducing the budget deficit and placing the public sector debt on a more sustainable path through strong fiscal reforms and enhanced governance. In this regard, as announced in the government program of the 2025-2026 budget speech, a Fiscal Responsibility Act will be introduced to establish a stronger rule-based fiscal framework, promote greater transparency and accountability in public finances, and reinforce sound public financial management practices and prevent the disaster that we had when the previous government was here.
Yes. Do you have a supplementary? Yes.
Oui, merci pour la réponse, Monsieur le Premier ministre. I would like to know whether the debt issue is a subject of discussion with the IMF, and what is the message which is given by the IMF to the Mauritian government?
The IMF, I met them. They just published the Article 4 report. They are very satisfied with the measures that we took to try to prevent debt from increasing.
Okay. Yes, Honourable Duval.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I had a question. May I ask the Prime Minister whether the Prime Minister agrees that he has been able to manage the deficit so far? Firstly, with considerable taxation has been imposed, greater revenue for taxation. Secondly, spending has been reduced because hardly any budgetary measures have been implemented to date. And therefore, does she consider that this is a sound fiscal policy, given that it is being done at the cost of economic growth, which you said, the Prime Minister said himself, is projected to be at a record low of 2.8%, a record low for Mauritius next year?
Yes, Prime Minister.
It's because we have these economic constraints, Madam Speaker, but I did say it's a balance again. On the one side, the debt, but also the growth. We must not take measures that actually stifle growth completely.
Yes, third member for Rivière-des-Anguilles.
Merci. B783.
Madam Speaker, as announced in the government program of 2025-2029, the government is determined to revitalize democratic principles, reinforce sound governance, and pursue constitutional reforms designed to enhance public confidence in the autonomy of state institutions. In this line, the Constitutional Review Commission Bill has been introduced in the National Assembly. We're going to debate it today. With its main object is to establish a Constitutional Review Commission responsible to examine and make recommendations on constitutional reforms such as the protection of fundamental rights and the consolidation of democracy and institutions. The bill, Madam Speaker, also provides, inter alia, amongst others, for the different powers and functions of the commissions, which covers strengthening of the protection of fundamental rights, enhancing privacy safeguards, introducing principles such as freedom of information, improving institutional governance through the creation of a senior officials appointment committee, which will make recommendations to the government on the appointment of heads of major public institutions. Furthermore, the Constitutional Review will look into our proposal to set up an electoral college for the election of the President of the Republic. There is no proposition to set up an electoral college for the election of Honourable Speaker of the House.
Okay, next question. You didn't have any. Ms. Dauriaru, you have no more questions. Okay, next question. Yes. Yes, Mr. Jaman.
Merci, Madame. Question B784, s'il vous plaît.
Madam Speaker, betting tax and a levy are imposed on betting activities in respect of horse racing and foreign football matches. Currently, a 14% betting tax on gross stakers, that is the total amount played net of refunds and cancelled bets, is paid by a punter. Furthermore, a 2.5% levy on gross gambling yield, that is the total amount played net of betting tax and winnings, is paid by a bookmaker. I'm informed, Madam Speaker, by the Minister of Finance that proposals were made at the level of the Gambling Regulatory Authority from operators and trainers for the removal of tax on punters and for the imposition of a higher tax rate on the net yield of bookmakers. The operators believe that the high rate of betting tax on punters may be the root cause for high-level illegal betting in Mauritius. Madam Speaker, may I remind the House that in September 2014, I had set up a full-fledged commission of inquiry on horse racing in Mauritius to look into all aspects of horse racing, including any financial malpractices, impropriety, illegal betting, illicit flow of funds in the organization of betting, and ill-gotten gains from fraud in relation to horse racing. These are often interconnected, and the presence of a large illegal market reduces revenue for licensed bookmakers and stakeholders, creating a cycle that undermines the integrity of the whole industry. The report of the Commission, the Barry Commission I'm talking about, highlighted that, and I quote, "Much evidence was presented about the possible size of the illegal market being at least as large, if not larger, than the legal market. The truth is that no one knows. However, the Commission considers the lack of official will and effort to combat the illegal market and the huge loss of revenue to the exchequer from the loss of taxation, estimated to be 800 million rupees in 2015, at the time the report, that is, was drafted, to be alarming and totally unacceptable." Madam Speaker, as soon as we took office in November 2024, this government set up a high-level committee under the chairmanship of the Secretary to the Cabinet and Head of the Civil Service to conduct a regulatory review of the legal framework governing horse racing, including the Gambling Regulatory Authority Act. Subsequently, in June 2025, the Gambling Regulatory Authority Act was amended to ensure that the authority performs as a credible regulator of the gaming and betting industry and operates in a fair, transparent, and accountable manner. The amendment also strengthened the provisions regarding illegal betting, money laundering, and tax evasion. To combat illegal betting, a horse racing integrity division was set up. Specialist staff were recruited. A new cell of police des jeux is now attached to the authority. The capacity of the GRA staff has been strengthened on enforcement and field inspection. An interagency coordination committee was set up to enhance the effectiveness in detection of illegal activities and enforcement of the provisions of the law, and a bookmaker's license for those operating outside the racecourse was reintroduced. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance and the GRA are contemplating the enlistment of a consultant to undertake a study and advise on the holistic approach for the framework of addressing illegal betting. The matter relates to taxation, and therefore any change will be dealt with in the coming budget.
Yes, Mr. Jamal. Okay, next question. Honourable Second Member for Audrey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. B/785.
Madam Speaker, we have adopted a unified national security policy encompassing legislative and investigative frameworks to track and combat money laundering and illicit financial offences. I'm informed by the Financial Crimes Commission that as of 22nd of May of 2026, 7 cases relating to money laundering offences in Rodrigues were reported. 4 of these cases were reported to the then ICAC, and 3 of at the FCC after coming into operation in March of 2024. Out of the 7 cases, 6 are currently under investigation, while 1 has been completed and referred to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. As regards cases reported to the police since 2020, inquiries in 2 cases of alleged money laundering have been completed by the Anti-Drug and Smuggling Units of Rodrigues and have been referred to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. In regard to Part B of the question, extensive awareness and sensitization campaigns on financial crimes, asset recovery, declaration of assets, and unexplained wealth investigations have been carried out by the FCC in Rodrigues with departmental heads of commission, public bodies, and other relevant stakeholders between December 2025 and May 2026. Furthermore, a financial crimes prevention review is currently being conducted on the various schemes administered by the Commission of Agriculture and Natural Resources with the objective to identify, mitigate, and address the potential risk of financial services. The Commission is planning additional prevention review focused on the issuance of permits and licenses in road rigs. Additionally, Madam Speaker, the operational capacity of law enforcement officers is being further strengthened through training in the anti-money laundering, which is being conducted jointly by the FCC and the Police Training School. In this respect, 3,573 police officers of all ranks, including 140 from Rodrigues, have been trained since 2020 to date.
Yes, one question.
Yes, Madam Speaker, just for the sake of clarification purposes, may I ask the Honourable Prime Minister, over and above the reported cases in Rodrigues, whether he is agreeable to request the concerned authorities to carry out further necessary investigations and inquiries into suspected cases. They are not reported, but suspected cases that we need to protect Rodrigues.
Of course, we need to protect Rodrigues. I think if there are complaints, they will certainly look into them.
Okay, next question. Honourable First Member for La Caverne Felix.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. B786, please.
Madam Speaker, I'm informed by the Commissioner of Police that on the 14th of May 2026, an Italian national reported an incident which occurred at Gangatalao at around 13:30 hours.
No, that's not the one. 786.
I missed
786,
the
Silver
question.
Bank.
Can you repeat the question? I don't think I...
Okay, can we keep it pending? Let's keep it pending, it's all right.
I moved it
Let's have second member for Rivière des Anguilles.
No, I have.
Okay.
As I've already stated in my reply to parliamentary question B716 last week, Madam Speaker, there was a major deficiency in the supervisory role of the Bank of Mauritius during the 10-year rule of the previous government. The inadequate regulatory oversight by the Bank of Mauritius, together with the dysfunctional boards of 4 banks, and ineffective internal credit assessment at the level of these banks, have allowed these banks to approve excessively risky loans. were arrested on the same day and detained at the Midlands police station. The suspects were provisionally charged on the 15th of May 2026 before the District Court of Savannah for the offence of larceny with aggravating circumstances. They were subsequently released on bail with conditions. Police inquiry into the matter is ongoing. In regards to Part B of the question, may I remind the House that after this gross disrespect that was shown at Grand Bassin by the former Attorney General and Minister of Agriculture, I had said, and you also had said, Honourable Member, that we should make that area a spiritual park. The government, actually the previous government, due to the public outcry, tried to correct matters, and they already, to preserve the sanctity of the Gangatalao, they have made it a spiritual sanctuary, but it should be safeguarded, and the whole area has to be managed, properly managed. My office has also received representations regarding its preservation, management, and safeguard of its sanctity. To this effect, I wish to point out that I had a meeting with the representatives of the Sanatan Dharma Temples Federation on the 7th of May 2026, during which several matters were discussed, including Gangatalao. I have reassured the Federation that necessary action will be taken to preserve the sanctity of Gangatalao, and relevant guidelines will be issued. I have also requested the Minister of Arts and Culture to develop an appropriate guidelines to establish a comprehensive framework for the management, protection, and preservation of the sanctity of Gangatalao. And he has to do this with consultations with the relevant stakeholders. The Ministry of Arts and Culture has already conducted several meetings on that matter. The House will appreciate that Mauritius, being a secular state, access to a spiritual sanctuary cannot be restricted. At the same time, it is imperative that all visitors comply with established practices, that is, regarding behavior, dress code, etc., in order to preserve the sanctity as well as uphold the cultural and religious significance of such sites. In this respect, I'm informed by the Ministry of Tourism that it is collaborating with the Ministry of Arts and Culture on sensitization campaigns for both local and international visitors to these spiritual sites.
Yes, all right. Mr. Kazer, third member for Port Louis North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. PQB 788, please.
Madam Speaker, I'm informed by the Commissioner of Police that as at 22nd of May 2026, out of a total of 269 police cells, 28 are currently temporarily non-operational, and the reasons are as follows. 4 cells in Bamboo, 1 cell in La Golette, 3 cells in Mayberg police stations are not operational due to repairs being made to the sewage systems. 20 cells in the Bakwa Detention Center are not operational due to maintenance works on the CCTV cameras thereof. I'm further informed that the sewage works at Bamboo, La Golette, and Mayberg police stations are expected to be completed by the end of May of 2026. As regards the maintenance of the CCTV cameras at Bakwa Detention Center, the works are expected to be completed by the 15th of June of this year. The cells will thereafter be operational. Madam Speaker, the conditions of the police cells are regularly reviewed by the police to ensure that they comply with the national human rights standards. Furthermore, the National Preventive Mechanism Division of the National Human Rights Commissions regularly visit police cells so as to examine the treatment of persons deprived of their liberty with a view to ensuring the protection against torture and inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment in accordance with the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture, to which Ashudan Mauritius is a party. They also submit recommendations regarding the review, upgrading, and maintenance of police cells, following which the police undertake remedial action.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, Mr. Ramdas. Honorable Ramdas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. PQB 789, please.
That will be the last question, I think. Yes.
Madam Speaker, let me start by setting the record straight. The allegation made by the former Minister of Finance that the Bank of Mauritius has printed and transferred 83 billion rupees to government is entirely false, unfounded, and malicious. Either this or he doesn't understand how the system works. On the contrary, I'm informed by the Bank of Mauritius that under the previous government, the bank printed a total of 181.5 billion rupees, with part of the amount remitted to the government and the remainder used to finance the Mauritius Investment Corporation. Again, let me say, it's 181.5 billion rupees that they printed. This is the consequence of what we're seeing today. A total amount of 97 billion rupees was remitted to the government during the period 2019 to 2024 as follows. 18 billion in December 2019 for repayment of external debt. 15 billion in April 2020 through the subscription of a 5-year government of Mauritius bond. 55 billion in the month of August 2020 and September 2020 as a one-off contribution to the budget, and 9 billion to the Development Bank of Mauritius Limited, the Industrial Finance Corporation of Mauritius Limited, and the State Investment Corporation Limited through lines of credit. Furthermore, an additional amount of 3.5 billion rupees was remitted to the National Property Fund through a line of credit prior to 2019. In addition, the Mauritius Investment Corporation Limited was fully financed by printing of money to the tune of 81 billion rupees. Madam Speaker, the previous government amended the Bank of Mauritius Act twice. First, in 2019 through the Finance Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 2019 to allow the bank to remit printed money to government for the repayment of external debt. This had never happened before. Secondly, in September 2020, through the COVID-19 Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 2020, they allowed the bank to pay printed money again to government to finance the budget deficit. Clearly, Madam Speaker, the central bank was directly financing government expenditure by printing money. This amounted to the monetization of the budget deficit in its purest forms. The funds in question did not originate from accumulated reserves, as repeatedly asserted by the former Minister of Finance, but rather from the sheer creation of new money by the central bank itself. Worse still, Madam Speaker, the MIC was created initially as the means to support systemic companies, but turned out to be a vehicle through which vast sums were challenged to associates and beneficiaries closely connected to the former Minister of Finance. This financial monstrosity has weakened the balance sheet of the central bank and constitute a potential contingent liability to government. As I have previously stated, Madam Speaker, the reckless printing of money by the previous administration of the Bank of Mauritius has had devastating consequences on our economy. Excess liquidity in the banking sector reached record levels. The inflation rate peaked, as I said earlier, to 11.3% in February 2023. The rupee depreciated significantly, as I said, 46% from 2019 to 2024. And excessive consumption, fueled by substantial amount of money created, led to a dramatic increase in the visible trade deficit. The printing of money weakened the bank's balance sheet and diminished its ability for effective monetary policy implementation. Madam Speaker, this was the disastrous bilan of the previous government and the legacy of the former Minister of Finance. Yet today, he has the audacity to claim that under this government, the Bank of Mauritius has printed 83 billion rupees. Such a statement is not only false, but reflects also a blatant attempt to distort the facts and mislead the public. That is what they're doing. This is sheer intellectual dishonesty. It potentially leads to the conclusion that the former minister perhaps doesn't understand basic monetary economics. This, Madam Speaker, cannot be accepted or condoned and must be met with appropriate actions in the interest of truth and public accountability. I am informed by the Bank of Mauritius that it has taken a number of actions to dispel any doubts that maybe have arisen from these unfounded allegations of money printing by the former Minister of Finance. These are as follows. First, the bank has properly issued a public notice wherein it firmly refuted the allegations and clarified that there was no money printing and transfer from to the government in 2025. Second, through the public notice, the bank informed all stakeholders and the public in general that information on monetary developments, which clearly show that there was no money printing by the bank, can be easily accessed into its monthly statistical bulletin published on its website, that is the bank's website. Third, the bank has provided all media houses with the relevant data along with an explanatory text to ensure that they have accurate information and to help them avoid any misinterpretation in their analysis of the matter. And fourth, the bank has maintained a regular communication with media houses and provided them with any further clarifications required on the matter. Madam Speaker, I'm also informed by the Bank of Mauritius that after consultations with the legal team, it has made a statement to the Central CID on the 16th of May 2026 on the very serious, false and malicious information by the former Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, the International Financial Center, our reputation is a key asset that underpins investor confidence and sustains economic stability. It is highly responsible for the former Minister of Finance to cast doubt in the minds of the public just for the sake of political gain. We must not and will not tolerate any such unfounded allegations or misinformation that could undermine the confidence in our institutions and financial system.
Yes, one question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Obviously, these gratuitous allegations have been made with a view to undermine public confidence. Other than the communique, the public notice, and the matter having been reported to the CID, would the Honourable Prime Minister invite the Bank of Mauritius to take appropriate civil action against this gentleman in order to avoid acts and doings of this sort in the future?
Yeah. Advice for civil action.
They have already reported the case, as I said, and I believe they will be calling him.
Okay, time is up. Time is up. The table has been advised, members, that the following PQs have been withdrawn. B801, 793, 795, 791, 796, 799, 794, and 803. Thank you very much. We have time for a few questions. I would call on Honourable First Member for Savane.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. B804.
Madam Speaker, with regard to part A of the question, I am informed by the District Council of Black River that 2 contracts for street cleaning, refuse collection and disposal, including the cutting away of post-cyclonic waste within the District Council area, was signed on 29 May 2025 for the period of 1st June 2025 to 31st May 2026. The contracts were divided into 2 lots, namely Lot 1 awarded to MaxiClean Company Limited and Lot 2 awarded to Atix Limited. I am further informed that the contracts provide for twice weekly refuse collection services covering household refuse and green waste. They also include the collection of bulky waste and cyclonic waste whenever required. In addition, the contractors are responsible for herbiciding, spraying, mowing, looping of branches up to 6 meters, cleaning of open drain and river banks, as well as sweeping activities throughout the district. With regard to part B of the question, Madam Speaker, I am informed that the contract awarded to MaxiClean Company Limited for Lot 1 amounts to 87,780,000 rupees excluding VAT, representing 7,315,000 rupees excluding VAT per month for the period of 1st June 2025 to 31st May 2026. The contract awarded to Atix Limited for Lot 2 amount to 77,280,000 rupees excluding of VAT, representing 6,440,000 rupees, excluding VAT per month for the same period. The total value for both contracts, therefore, is stand at 165,060,000 rupees, excluding VAT. With regard to Part C of the question, I am informed that under the terms and conditions of the contracts, Maxiclean Company Limited provides 5 tipper lorries and 5 compactors for Lot 1, while ATIX provide 4 tipper lorries and 4 compactors for Lot 2. Accordingly, a total of 9 tipper lorries and 9 compactors are placed at the disposal of the Council. I am informed that in the event of any mechanical breakdown, the contractors are contractually required to provide replacement vehicles so as to continuity of service delivery without disruption. With regard to Part D of the question, I am informed that a total workforce of 258 personnel is currently deployed under both contracts. The manpower includes supervisors, foremen, refuse collectors, sweepers, drain cleaners, drivers, bush cutter, and pole pruner operators, lawn mower operators, as well as a herbicide sprayer. Madam Speaker, I am also informed that supervision and monitoring of the works are carried out by the Health Inspectorate of the Black River District Council. Any shortcomings observed are formally communicated to the contractors for immediate remedial action, and where necessary, penalty clauses are applied in accordance with the contractual provision. With regard to Part E of the question, I inform that the areas covered under Lot 1 operated by the Maxiclean Company Limited are Albion, Gros Caillou, Cano, Petite Rivière, Richelieu, Bambou, and Féconflac. And the area covered under the Lot 2 operated by ATIX Limited are Casnoyal, Petite Rivière Noire, Beauchonge, Cascavel, Tamarin, Grande Rivière Noire, La Golette, Lemon, and Chamarel. Madam Speaker, I am further informed that both contracts are due to expire on 31st May 2026. Approval has already been obtained from the Central Procurement Board for an extension up to 25%, representing a maximum period of 3 months, and both contractors have agreed for the contract to continue on a month-to-month basis. Based on the same terms and conditions, so as to ensure that there is no disruption whatsoever in refuse collection and scavenging services within the District Council. In parallel, a new tender exercise for the period of 3 years, which will include segregation at source and enhanced service delivery requirements, is being finalized. I am informed that the bidding documents have already been vetted by the Central Procurement Board, and the new procurement exercise will be launched shortly.
Thank you.
Thank
yes, you. One question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In regards to Lot 2 of the answer the Minister gave, I would like to know how many big lorries and small lorries we got for ATIX, if he have the information.
I doubt he will have that. You know, basically, we will have to think about, is it proper to ask the Minister such questions? We'll have to think about that. Can we keep that for next time? Please find out.
I do have it, but it's nothing about that term metric.
Okay. Let's just have it in writing.
Yeah.
You table it.
Madam
more.
Speaker,
Okay.
will the Minister consider bringing some small lorries in Lot 2 area, where all those roads are narrow, and
Yes.
we have lots of complaints where those lorries can't access those roads?
I'm sure you will consider, Minister.
Madam Speaker, I'll take note of the request of the Honourable Member, and I will communicate the request to the Council, and I can make sure that this issue can be addressed in the forthcoming tender exercise.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes?
Madam Speaker, will the Minister consider to carry the work in-house in future?
Oh, not privatization, you mean? Yes.
You know, the Council has its own decision by the full Council meeting,
Exactly.
so I will take
Exactly.
take a note, and I can
I
convey
feel very
the request to the
strongly-
respective Council.
Members, I feel very strongly about these questions on local government. I'm not sure it's proper. We will deal with this later. Okay, Honourable First Member for Vaucluse-Floréal.
B805.
Madam Speaker, at the outset, I wish to declare my interest in the matter as Mrs. MMB used to work as carer for my mother, who is 80 years old. My mother is a heart patient and she lives alone with her father, who is 85 years old. In 2023, my mother fractured her shoulder and collarbone and was advised by her doctor to recruit a carer to stay with her. On 10 April 2023, my mother submitted an application for work permit to the ministry for the employment of Mrs. MMB as carer for a period of 3 years. I am informed that the application was processed in line with prevailing procedures at the ministry, and a work permit was issued on 20th of June 2023, authorizing Mrs. MMB to take up employment as carer for a period of 2 years. On 30th of May 2025, my mother applied for the renewal of the work permit of Mrs. MMB for a period of 2 years, and same was renewed by the permanent secretary of my ministry in line with the General Notice number 1514 of 2022 regarding delegation of powers for the grant or refusal of an application for permits regarding non-citizens in cases where the minister is not exercising his powers on grounds of conflict of interest. In line with established practice which predated my appointment as minister, I was not involved at all in the renewal exercise. On 6 April 2026, my mother informed my ministry that Mrs. MMB had on the 3rd of April 2026 at around 8 o'clock at night, left her house and had since not come back. I wish to point out, Madam Speaker, that it was my mother who informed my ministry that Mrs. MMB was missing and not the Bangladesh High Commission, as is suggested in the wording of the PQ. In line with existing protocol, the Special Migrant Workers Unit of my ministry conducted an inquiry into the matter and informed that there were no outstanding dues payable and there were absolutely no complaint made against the employer and no case of ill treatment or exploitation had been detected regarding that worker. The work permit of Mrs. MMB was therefore cancelled and the PIO was informed accordingly. I'm informed that the police has up to now not been able to trace out the whereabouts of Mrs. MMB, but she's still in the country. Madam Speaker, in 2023, the then government decided to put a ban on the recruitment of new foreign workers from Bangladesh, as there was a high number of missing Bangladeshi workers in the country, as reported by the Passport and Immigration Office. In fact, there is a well-organized network whereby some foreign workers destined for one employer are lured to leave their employer to work for other employers against promise of higher pay. When the present government took office in November 2024, there were around 3,940 illegal foreign workers in the country. Following the recommendation of the Interministerial Committee on Work Permit issues, various measures were introduced to facilitate the recruitment of foreign workers, which led to a considerable reduction in the number of missing workers. As there was a high demand for Bangladeshi workers from different sectors, and the number of Bangladeshi workers without valid permit had been reduced to 1412, as per record of my ministry, government on 5th September 2025 agreed to allow the recruitment of new Bangladeshi workers in the bakery, textile, printing, as well as other scarcity areas. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, since we have resumed the recruitment of Bangladeshi workers, the number of workers reported missing by their employers has doubled to 2,819, out of which I'm informed by PIO, 2,219 of Bangladeshi. That is, close to 80% of missing workers today are from Bangladesh. I wish to inform the House that the issue of illegal workers have been previously raised in other parliamentary questions, including PQ B151 and B1528, addressed to the Honourable Prime Minister on the 31st of March 2026 regarding overstaying and missing foreign workers. In his reply, the Honourable Prime Minister had informed the House that the Commissioner of Police had been requested to strengthen the crackdown team in collaboration with other units and branches of the police, including SMF. Also, in another primary question, B670, for the sitting of the 12th of May 2026, I highlighted the fact that the police never arrest nor prosecute any employer who illegally employ migrant workers without a valid work permit, including missing foreign workers. Whenever there is a crackdown operation, it is only the illegal workers who are arrested and prosecuted without any legal action taken against the employers. Madam Speaker, I have personally taken up this matter with the police and the High Commissioner of Bangladesh on several occasions, as the missing foreign workers are vulnerable. They have no protection under the Workers' Rights Act, no proper accommodation facilities, and they can be easily exploited and become victims of trafficking in person. My ministry is closely monitoring the situation with the Passport and Immigration Office.
Thank you. Yes.
Je vous remercie. Madame la Présidente, ce cas est bien bouleversant. L'honorable ministre peut-il confirmer que l'employé en question se serait enfui de la résidence de son employeur en passant par la sortie destinée à l'évacuation des ordures? Et si c'est le cas, peut-il confirmer qu'un ou une travailleuse étrangère dont le permis de travail est lié à un employeur spécifique conserve néanmoins sa pleine liberté de mouvement en vertu de la loi?
Madam Speaker, I have been informed that according to the police report, which has been communicated to my office, there is one witness who actually saw Mrs. MMB leave the house by the back door and go into a taxi with a man from Bangladesh. And I'd like to, in answer to the second part of the question, no, it is totally illegal for a worker to stay in Mauritius without a valid work permit. He has to be deported, and that is the point I was making. The police only arrest the foreign workers and don't go after the employers who employ these illegal workers.
Yes, second.
Je ne parlais pas de contrat de permis valide ou pas, je parlais de liberté de mouvement. Il est interdit selon la loi d'enfermer un employé ou une employée, n'est-ce pas? Donc, je viens sur ma deuxième question supplémentaire. Le ministre a mentionné un grand nombre de travailleurs venant du Bangladesh qui sont portés disparus, qui sont portés manquants. Comment explique-t-il que le High Commission du Bangladesh ait émis un communiqué spécifiquement pour cette travailleuse étrangère? Il a dit un peu plus tôt qu'il s'est récusé de toute implication ministérielle dans ce cas. Comment peut-il expliquer donc que le High Commission du Bangladesh a sorti un communiqué spécifiquement pour cet employé?
Madam Speaker, I think I was very clear. I said that in 2025, when my mother applied to renew the work permit, after 2 years, so we're talking about a worker who's been working with her for 3 years now, 3 years working with her. I was not involved at all with the renewal. But I have had conversation with the High Commissioner, not on one occasion, but on several occasions, not about this particular person, but about the high prevalence of workers from Bangladesh who runs away. We also have cases of Bangladeshi workers coming to Mauritius, and right from the airport, they're taken away by some mysterious people and never even set foot in the company, in the textile company or construction company where they're working. And I say it again, the problem is with the police never prosecuting illegal Mauritian employers who prey on the victims, on these illegal missing Bangladeshi workers.
I'm sorry. What about the liberté de mouvement? Let's clear this.
Madam Speaker, everybody, before any foreign worker comes to Mauritius, they have to sign an agreement with their employer. This agreement is vetted by my ministry. So in that ministry, we make sure that all the rights that is, applicable to a Mauritian worker is extended to a migrant worker. So the number of hours which a migrant worker can work will be in accordance with the applicable remuneration order that is applicable to any other worker, a local worker. So there is absolutely no discrimination between a Mauritian worker and a foreign worker. And I'll go even further, that there's been cases where my ministry has reported to the police cases where certain employers were illegally retaining the passport of their migrant worker. This is totally illegal, and my officers have reported these cases to the police.
Okay, your last question.
Il a été déploré que cet employé était maintenu enfermé illégalement. Est-ce que le ministre aurait...
Mr. Speaker, a strong objection. I want this gentleman, this lady to withdraw whatever she just said. She said that this worker was kept house and prevented from going out. That's an absolute lie, and it's extremely shameful coming from a girl who used to be an MMM, to talk like this on my mother. Shame! 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 We're not like you, we're not colonial. We're not so colon dans mon sang, moi. We're not so colon dans mon sang.
Oh, I don't think it's that the time to do this. Honorable, honorable members, will you please behave, all of you? Honorable member, stand up if you want to speak. Stand up. Listen. First of all, one moment. First of all, listen to me. You made an averment. You made an averment that this person was locked up. Is that what it? C'est dans le domaine public.
Dans les médias.
Donc, quand c'est dans les médias, vous répétez. OK, time is up.
Dans le domaine public, c'est mon devoir de venir mettre dans le...
Okay.
If I may, on a point of
order.
order.
Let us have a third party. Okay.
A third party will try to calm things down. Just to make clear, on a point of order, the honourable member has just stated that she's referring to the media and the press. The standing order says you can't. Full stop. So she has
that
to.
Is true.
So therefore, she has. If she based herself on the press, she has to withdraw everything.
Okay. One moment. I am going to raise now. When I come back after tea time, I will give a ruling on this point. No. I don't think that was proper. Will you please withdraw?
I withdraw, Madam Speaker.
Yes, both of you. Please withdraw. Please withdraw. Okay. Now we go for lunch, and I will give a ruling after tea time. If I can still speak.